So we're going to look at linear functions, just the basics. All of this document is literally what you should have learned back in Algebra 1. All of it. You took your STAR test over it, so this should not be brand new to anybody. So the first thing I want to talk about, I'm going to go through the basic stuff of what does all of this mean, and then I'll give you guys some time to try to do some of the questions on your own, because honestly, I don't like to waste time unless I absolutely have to. So first things first, the general equation. There's technically 3 of them. The first one is slope-intercept form. The second one is point slope. So point slope form. And then the last one is standard. These are the 3 most common forms that you guys see for an equation. Those are the general forms that you guys usually see. What does slope-intercept form look like? Jordan? Y equals mx plus b. So anytime I ask for slope-intercept form, that's what I want to see. What about point slope? Emma? That's it. So point slope form is literally where you have a point and a slope that's plugged in, so some random coordinate like 1, 1. And slope-intercept form needs to have your slope and the y-intercept. What about standard form? What does standard form look like? Go ahead, Alec. Not bx. by. And what is it going to equal? There you go. Standard form is not the prettiest of forms, but it's a form that you guys see probably more often than not. In standard form, you can't immediately identify the slope. You can't immediately identify the x-intercept, y-intercept. It's more difficult to deal with. That's why most students like to deal with slope-intercept and point slope, but standard form still is useful. You still will be asked to find that form. On my tests and quizzes, when I do assess you on this, I'm going to probably ask for all 3 forms. So make sure you understand and feel comfortable with finding these forms. All right, next one, slope formula. Yeah, what's the equation for the slope formula? I'll give you a hint. It begins with m equals. That's it. So that's my slope formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Your teachers back in whatever grade you took Algebra 1 probably also mentioned the change in y over the change in x. You see that a lot more when you get into physics, but it's still representing a change of some sort. Ahmad, for horizontal and vertical lines, what does a horizontal line look like? Y equals. So horizontal lines are literally y equals some kind of number. It's going to cross the y-axis at whatever number you're looking at. So for instance, if I was to, this is just a very rough sketch of a graph. Let's say this little hash mark here is 2. If I was to draw a horizontal line going through that, the equation for this would just be y equals 2. Horizontal lines have literally a horizontal line going through it. The equation is just where it crosses the y-axis. Follow-up question, Ahmad. What type of slope is that? There's 4 types of slope: positive, negative, 0, and undefined. What slope is this one? That's what I thought. 0. Yes, this is a 0 slope. So 0 slopes are horizontal lines, which mean vertical lines are going to be a undefined slope. In those undefined slopes, you're now going to graph, so I'm just going to graph this out. You would have a line, let's say any line, it could be -1. You're going to draw a vertical line going through it, and you would write the equation as what? X equals. You're going to put x equals -1. So for that equation, I'm going to write this as x equals some kind of number. So whatever that number is where it's crossing the x-axis. All right, last 2. Parallel lines. You saw this back in Algebra 1 and geometry, so it should not be too far from your mind. What's a parallel set of lines? Lauren?
Like where
the lines never touch. So when you were in Algebra 1 and when you were in geometry, you learned something about the slope and the y-intercept for those. What do you remember? Uh-oh. Emma, help her out. They have the same slope. So for parallel lines especially, they have the same slope. Do they have the same y-intercept? No. I'm going to put same slope, but different. Hopefully I spelled different right? Y-intercept. Perpendicular lines are a little different. I'll tell you now, they're not going to be the same slope. They're going to intersect. I forgot your name. Haley. Yes, Haley. They're reciprocal and negative. So a lot of teachers will say like negative reciprocal or opposite reciprocal. That's the slope for your perpendicular lines. So your slope is you can either say negative or opposite reciprocal. And just like your parallel lines, the y-intercepts are going to be different. So for instance, let's say I had the equation y equals 3x plus 2. What's the slope in this equation? My slope is equal to 3. If I asked you to find the perpendicular slope, again, hopefully you remember from geometry, the upside down t represents perpendicular. Haley, what's the perpendicular slope for 3? Negative 1 over 3. You literally make it a fraction, flip that fraction, so do the reciprocal, and then if your slope originally is positive, make it negative. Thank you, Haley. So right now, I'm going to give you guys a couple questions that I want you to try. And literally, you can start, I would recommend starting on them on your own, and then if you need to, ask somebody next to you or around you. But I want you to see what you can get. I'm purposely going to change number 2, and you're actually going to do number 2. So cross this one out. And I want you to try to do instead f of x equals 9 minus 2x over 3. All right, so you're going to try to do number 2. And then I'll flip it over, and I want you to try a few more. All right, so really quick, for number 2, you're going to rewrite that as f of x equals 9 minus 2x over 3. And then on the back side, I want you to try numbers 3, 5, and if you have time, 7. So all of them on the left side, 3, 5, and 7. Since this is a review of Algebra 1, I'm going to give you about 4 minutes. If you need a little more time, then we'll see what we can do. But for right now, I want you to do numbers 2, 3, 5, and 7. Give you about 4 minutes. Remember, for number 2, make sure you graph this using some kind of ruler or ID to make a straight line. If you don't make a straight line, I will cut off or take off points on your tests and quizzes. For question 5, for sure, you can write it in slope-intercept form. But for question 7, I'm actually going to write this in all 3 forms. So point slope, slope-intercept, and standard. Okay, so for first question here, number 2. For this question, that 3 is being divided by everything in the numerator. Do you guys agree with that? Okay, so you should have rewritten this as 9 over 3 minus 2 over 3. And don't forget the x. What is 9 over 3 reduced to? And that's going to be minus 2 over 3x. I'm going to rewrite the y in front of this, or f of x. It's the exact same thing. As I have it right now, it's kind of disgusting to try to write or graph this in slope-intercept form, because it looks like it's in slope-intercept form, but it's not. How can I write this in slope-intercept form? What would it look like? Lauren Ann?
Y equals
plus 3. Good job. Especially for this question, when you rearrange it, the negative has to go with the 2/3. The 3 is positive, so make sure you rewrite it as a positive. Since your slope is negative, guys, keep in mind, negative slopes go in a down direction just like this. So when I graph this out, make sure that you put as many points as possible and put it as negative. So since it's in slope-intercept form, we're going to start the graph at positive 3, which is right here. From that point, I'm going to go down 2 units to the right 3. Guys, I don't know who your last teacher was for Algebra 1 or Geometry, and I really don't care. But for me, I want to have, for your line, I want to see every point that you put on your graph, and I want to see you actually create a straight line. We're about to go through systems of equations in the next coming weeks. So if you don't give me as many points as possible and you don't graph a straight line, your system is not going to be pretty. So notice that I put all of my points, and I'm just going to connect it with a line. That should be my graph. So double check your graph with mine. Make sure it looks good. Are we good for this part? All right, good. Let's look at the next page. If I'm moving too fast, guys, please let me know, because I've done this like several times. All right, for example 3, this one says x equals -1. Okay, if we look back on the first page, this is the one that Ahmad helped me with. So he told me that y equals is horizontal, x equals is vertical. So for vertical, I'm going to start my graph on the x-axis at -1, and I am going to draw a vertical line going through it. So there's -1. I just draw a vertical line going through it. You actually make it straight. Use your ruler, guys, because I want to make sure that it's straight, like mine. And this should be your graph. That's it. Questions or concerns about number 3? All right, for number 5. This one asks you to write the equation. I asked you guys to write it in slope-intercept form, so y equals mx plus b. Raise your left hand. Hi. Raise your left hand and put it down on your paper next to the graph. This is your leftmost point. This is the left point that you're going to always start with. Again, I don't know or care who your last teacher was who taught you this, but I always have my students start with the leftmost point. You make less mistakes when you start from the left. When you start from this point, how am I going to get to the next one? Where do I need to go? Up. So I need to go up. We're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units. Is that right? And then we're going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. Is this slope positive or negative? So I'm going to put my slope is going to be +7/5 because I went up 7 units into the right. When you go up into the right, your slope is positive. What's the y-intercept in this? Positive or negative? So we're going to write our equation as y equals 7/5. Please don't forget the x plus 7. This is your equation. If you put f of x instead of y, it's the exact same thing. It's just writing it as a function of x instead of y equals. For question number 5, questions? Yes, ma'am. I always tell my students to start at the left because when I used to have students start on the right, they would make plenty of mistakes. They would go to the left and then to the left and then down. I always have my students start from the left, go up or down first, and then left or right. Is that okay? All right, last question for number 7. It says find the slope and then write the equation. I told you guys for question 7, we're going to write it in all 3 forms: slope-intercept, point slope, and standard form. Okay, first things first, I need to find the slope. So in order to find the slope, I think it was Yael who told me on the first page the slope formula is written here. So she gave me this formula. In order to actually write my slope formula, I need to look at the 2 points they gave me. Caitlin, what can I do with these 2 points? If I want to find the slope, what can I do with these 2 points? Okay, so I actually need to label those first. Let me actually label which ones are x2, y2, all that good stuff. I always tell my students the first point you see, do x1, y1. Second point you see, make that x2, y2. If you write that out first, you're less likely to make a mistake. From here, I'm going to actually find the slope. So for the slope, step 1, m is going to equal y2 minus y1, which we said was 6, over x2 minus x1. Again, I used to tell my students back in Algebra 1, whenever you're finding the slope, plug it in using a set of parentheses. You'll thank me for this tip when we get later on into class. With the rest of this, though, we're just going to go ahead and simplify. The main reason I keep these in parentheses is to see if any of your signs are going to change. Specifically, if this was like a -6, it would turn into a +6 here. Since I don't see that, though, I'm just going to subtract. So we're going to make this -5 over 2. Can I simplify that further? No, this is my slope. Okay, so that's the first part. Find your slope. The second part says write your equation. When you're writing the equation, I'm telling you now, we're writing it in all 3 forms. When you're writing it in all 3 forms, I suggest starting with point slope form. Point slope form can get you any other equation that you want. If you didn't use point slope form initially when you were working by yourself, it's okay. Just follow along with what I'm doing and check your answer with mine. Okay, point slope form is y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. Point slope form is true for whatever point you have on your line. So I know my slope. And I know I have 2 points that are going to be on my line. All I need you guys to do is just pick one of the points. Since we already labeled x1 and y1, that's the point I'm going to use in this equation. So we're going to write this as y minus y1 equals m x minus x1, which is 2. Why did I put this in parentheses again? What was I looking for? Anything to be negative, any signs that need to change. So any sign changes that I need possible. Are any of the signs going to change here? This is your answer in point slope form. And it's fine if you use the other point. If you use the other point instead, you're fine. It'll still simplify to the same answer. So on tests and quizzes, if I ask you to write this in point slope, I'll either specify which point to use or I'll make a key where every point you pick can be a possible answer choice. Okay, that's point slope. Listen carefully to what I'm saying. From this equation, how can I get it into slope-intercept? I'm here. I need to solve for y, but how? Alec, what were you saying? No, what were you saying? Am I? Distribute. What number? That's exactly it. So if I was asking you to go from here into slope-intercept form, which you can do, just distribute. So over here next to it in hot pink, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Y minus 6 is going to equal negative 5 over 2, x minus 2. I'm going to distribute. This will give me y minus 6 equals negative 5 over 2x. You actually put the 5 over 2 first. And then negative times negative is going to give you a positive. 5 over 2 times 2 is just going to give you 5. From here, how do I get y by itself? I need to move one more thing. Add 6. So y is going to equal negative 5 over 2x plus 11. This is your answer in slope-intercept. There's one last form I need to get to, and that's in standard form. How can I get, listen carefully, how can I get from slope-intercept form into standard? This is always the fun one. How do I get from slope-intercept form into standard? Go ahead, Sonia. The negative what? That's exactly what you would do. Standard form, and I'm going to write it underneath because I ran out of space. ax plus by equals c, that's standard form. So let me take y equals negative 5 over 2x plus 11, and let's make this in standard form. The way I'm going to do that, like Sonia said, I'm going to add 5 over 2x to each side. That's going to get the x in front, which is what I want. There's one issue, though. With the a value that's in front, so this a value, and I'm actually going to flip over back to the front page, this a value should always be a positive whole number. If you're solving this on your own, I always want this to be a positive whole number. So on the front page, really quickly, I'm going to actually write that out next to standard. A is a positive whole number. Main reason why I say that is because that fraction that we have so far, that's not going to work for me. So Sonia helped us out by moving that 5 over 2x to the front, but how do I make that 5 over 2 into a whole number? Jordan? Multiply the entire equation by 2. So on the bottom of this page, we're actually going to do that. So I'm going to multiply the entire equation. Notice how she said entire equation by 2. That's going to leave my final answer as 5x plus 2y equals 22. This is my answer in standard form. So I have my 3 forms that I wrote out. Standard, I have slope-intercept, and I have point slope. These are all the forms. If I ask you to write an equation in standard form, I would honestly suggest starting with point slope and working your way through slope-intercept to standard. Hopefully y'all know the other way you can actually write an equation in slope-intercept form is using slope-intercept form, and we're going to do that on the next page. So before we move on and flip the page, do we have any other questions on this problem? For question number 8, that's right underneath, I would definitely try to take some time before your next test or quiz when this is assessed And make sure you can do all three forms on your own, because I helped you. Make sure you can do all three forms on your own. All right, I'm going to give you a couple questions and a couple minutes to do them. I want you guys to do questions 11, or not, goodness gracious, that's not an 11, that's a 1. Numbers 1, 2, and 4 right now. So I'm going to give you about, we'll say the same 4 minutes. Do the questions 1, 2, and 4. For the equations for the first two, we can write both of these in slope-intercept form. So for numbers 1 and 2, just write them in slope-intercept form. All right, let's look to see what you guys got. So, for the first question, for number 1, this one says it needs to contain the point 5, 8, and it has to be parallel to the graph of y equals 7x minus 6. So, Jude, first thing I need to know, especially since I know I'm going to write this equation in slope-intercept form, I need to find the slope. So, what's the slope for the new equation that I'm going to make? Well, technically not the x, but yes, 7. Anytime I ask for slope, guys, just give me the number. The x that goes with it helps you identify what the slope is. But yes, your slope is 7. How would you write the equation from that, though? How do you get the y-intercept? Can I just use 8 as my y-intercept? Oh, I'm hearing yes. Sage, you're shaking your head. What's wrong? That's the y value. So how do I find the y-intercept that goes through this point and has this slope? Okay. Try to find b. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the slope that I have. We're going to take this point, Jude, and we're going to plug it in to y equals mx plus b. We're going to have to find that y-intercept. That's mistake number 1, and I'm betting money, guys, if this is a multiple choice test or quiz, especially if I make it, that there is going to be an answer that says y equals 7x plus 8, because I know some of you guys are going to put that 8. So write this out as y equals mx plus b. We're going to plug in the y value, which is 8, the slope is 7, and the x is 5. We need to solve for b. So we're going to multiply. And in order to isolate b, we're going to subtract 35 on each side. I'm not a human calculator, so what's 8 minus 35? Negative 27. That should be your b value. So if I was to write this out, I'm going to write it as y equals 7x minus 27. Remember, this has the same slope as the original problem, but it has a different y-intercept. What's wrong, Lauren? No. And you can keep it, you can do it in point slope form. If you want me to do point slope form with it, I can.
No, I had it correct. I was just like confused.
No. You did it absolutely right. There's 2 ways. I said it on the last problem. There's 2 ways to solve this. You can plug it into point slope form like we did before, or you can use this method. They're both going to give you the same answer. For you? Yeah. No, you guys are fine. If y'all use point slope form, you are on the right track. You just need to simplify it. When you simplify it, you're going to get the exact same answer. All right. Are we good? All right. Next question, number 2. This one's asking me to identify the equation that contains 3, 5 and is perpendicular to the graph y equals negative 8x plus 6. Okay, Emma S. Perpendicular. Perpendicular means I can't use the slope that's already here. So my slope right now is negative 8. What's my perpendicular slope going to be? Positive or negative? Positive. Good. Okay, so can I just write my equation now as y equals 1 over 8x plus 5? No. Emma, what do I have to do? Solve for b. So there's, say it again. So we can plug it into y equals mx plus b, just like we did for this last question. If you want to plug it into point slope and then simplify, you can do that here. I'm not telling you you can't. So for this question, I'm just going to rewrite y equals mx plus b, because most of the time your Algebra 1 teacher probably taught you how to do it this way. I'm going to plug in the slope that I need to use with 5, 1 over 8, the 3 for x, and we're going to solve for b. So we're going to make this 5, which equals 3 over 8 plus b. There's 2 ways to simplify this ugly fraction equation. I can do one of two things. I can multiply the whole equation by 8, which is honestly my personal favorite, or we can replace 5 with some kind of fraction where you have 8 in the denominator. Personally, I like to multiply the entire equation by 8. If you wanted to replace 5 with a denominator of 8, what would the numerator need to be? It would need to be 40 over 8. So it's not that difficult. You would just have to rewrite it. So we'll leave it as 40 over 8, since some of you guys did that. And then I would need to subtract 3 over 8 on each side. So we're going to have 40 over 8 equals 3 over 8 plus b. I'm going to subtract 3 over 8 on each side. When you subtract both of these, are you subtracting the denominators? No, just the numerators. So Olivia, what's 40 minus 3? You're right, 37. And we're going to keep that over 8. This is my y-intercept. And Olivia, what was the slope again? Positive or negative? So to write this in slope-intercept form, I'm going to write this as 1 over 8x plus 37 over 8. On tests and quizzes, guys, this would be your answer. I am notorious, especially for quizzes, to put your slope-intercept form answers as fractions for the slope and the y-intercept. So if you get a fraction for your slope and y-intercept, don't be scared. It's probably the right answer. Yes, ma'am. If you multiplied the entire equation here by 8, yeah, I can do it right now. So I'm going to do it in the bottom space. We're going to make this 40 over 8 equals 3 over 8 plus b. When you multiply the whole equation by 8, oh, thank you. This is supposed to be a 5. Thank you. Is that okay? So when you multiply the whole equation by 8 here, Olivia, you're going to have 40, which equals 3 plus 8b. Is that okay? Are you okay from here? Or do I need to finish? All right. All you would need to do here is just solve for b. But yes, it will get you the exact same answer. All right, last question before we move on. Number 4. For number 4, it says, I want to write the equation that is horizontal and contains the point -2, 6. What do you guys think the answer is? Y equals 6. What kind of 6? Positive 6. Y equals positive 6. That is the correct answer. If you're like, I don't know how they got that. This is literally what I do, and I've been teaching for 10 years. This is still the same thing that I do. I'm going to graph it out. We're going to have -2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's not the prettiest of graphs, but it's close. And I'm going to plot the point -2, 6. Do you agree that that's the point -2, 6? All I'm going to do from here is make a horizontal line going through it. Horizontal is side to side or up and down. If you draw a side-to-side line going through this, it is going to cross what axis? The y-axis at what number? That's all you have to do. The other way that most people probably got this answer is you just literally look at the y value for your equation, since you know that it's going to be, or the coordinate, since you know it's going to be horizontal, and just write it as y equals 6. There's really not much work you need to show me for these questions. All right, last chance. Any last questions, comments, or fears? Yes, ma'am. No. All right, we're good.